Yes, hello everyone. My name is Awal Elegbede. I am a product manager, product leader. I I am also I worked as a product manager for a decade. I was a software engineer at some point. Graduated into what you typically call enterprise architect. I used to be a soft solution architect. I worked for um, perhaps the biggest fintech in West Africa. Um, Yeah, and today I would be um, discussing this session, Zero to MVP, a practical masterclass on product execution. Um, I think just to set the tone in terms of what I I'd like to give from here is to give a story. Like it's a story, but like maybe it's two sides of a story, and it's something that is practical in my experience over time. Um, Couple of years back, there was a young guy um, that reached out to me, and young chap had brilliant idea, and he wanted to build an app. And I think the app, I'll probably not mention what it is. People may know a little bit of it. Um, he believed the app would change everything, and the chap was passionate, was so motivated about it. I mean, everything was all gingered for him. But there was a problem. He was broke. I mean, he was broke. He was yeah, by broke I mean he had very little resources, but he had something, but he had very little resources. So the guy typically did what most first time builders will do. Like he spent better parts of 6 months learning how to code. He paid some freelancers, the little he had. Um, I mean he couldn't really afford it, but he paid them. And then he built a really massive feature list. He built very nice product, and it was ready for a feature launch. When he launched it, my guy hits a very bitter reality. Nobody used it. Really, nobody used it. And I smiled, but wasn't funny for everybody. It was something nobody used it. And it wasn't because the guy's idea was bad. I mean, I think the idea was good, but it wasn't because the idea was bad. And it wasn't because the guy wasn't smart. He learned how to code, he learned how to do stuff, he did it within 6 months. Um, but I think one of the things I found out is really that the problem was that he started from a solution. He didn't start from the problem. So the problem is that started from a solution. So he was so gingered in terms of that, oh, this is the solution. And then he kept on going out on that solution. And he didn't rewire into the problem. And um, the market taught him that. I'll course correct that with um, a contrary example of another person that this one I worked with him. It was a colleague, and he also had an idea. And but I mean, this was somebody in that came from the banking sector. It wasn't a developer and stuff like that. Instead of building anything, the chap was literally just became a marketer. He was talking to people up and down, marking problems, validating things, and all that. In 10 days, the guy had the version of the application. Like it was a manual version. It wasn't really good. They had this landing page and everything. So for me, I think that if we're to compare and contrast both stories, you see that yeah, in reality, both of them had the same energy, but they had different processes and then they achieved different results. So I think that sets the tone for the reality of what I'd like to a lot of people to gain in this session where um, you go from zero to MVP. And it's the process um, that actually determine the outcome and not necessarily the idea. Sometimes the idea is good, but I mean, if you jump at it, you might end up falling at it. So, okay, now the first thing, I mean, let's set this. So, the topic is zero to MVP. MVP, you all know what an MVP is conceptually, or at least you think you know what an MVP is. But I think, from my own experience, really like to give people a lot more experience in terms of this. Um, I think most people tend to think that an MVP is a small version of an entirely big application. And from what I have seen and from the examples that I gave, and I think it's an extreme fallacy, because it's really not. That's not exactly what it is. You need to understand that an MVP, even though it says minimum viable product, it's not a small version of a bigger. It's what you could say that is the smallest thing that you could build, that you can learn the biggest thing about the idea that you have, about the problem that you think you can solve. So it's like you want to build something that goes from A to Z. What is the smallest part, the shortest part you can take that would actually um, essentially be able to tell you if there is a way that you can go from A to Z? Because it might not be, obviously there might be no route to get from A to Z, but you need to be able to set a path that would allow you to validate the concept and the idea that you have that will solve that problem. And that's essentially what the role of a founder is in determining what an MVP is. It's not, oh, I want to build a POS reconciliation thing, and then I have all the features all listed out, and I'll just build this smallest, I'll build this simple part of it. No, that's not the idea. That's not the way an MVP could work. An MVP is, how do I know that this problem, reconciliation, maybe like, okay, let's say POS agents, they needed something to reconcile transactions at the end of the day, or you go to ShopRite, for instance, how do the accounts department in ShopRite, how do they make sure that the books is balanced at the end of the day? For you to do that, there are a lot of features you need to build. But how do you know that that's a problem that they have? So, and how do you know that you're building the right thing? So you need to build the first thing very easily that will allow you to get towards that solution point. So I said one thing. I said, as you know, and MVP is not a tiny product of the final print. It's not it's an experiment that you use to test your risk case assumption. And your risk case assumption is this the solution? Really, is this a solution? And you need to focus on impact and not features. So again, I'll say that an MVP is essentially a tool that will allow you um, to learn towards the purpose of a launch. And essentially it's, you go towards it to understand exactly what to build. And a lot of the big products that you see today, um, they're as a result of nicely picked MVPs and iterated MVPs that were iterated over, and then they become the mammoths and the big products that they are today. And we'll talk a lot more about that. But before we even go into like the MVP, let's talk about how do you find the problem. I think that's the next stage of our um so you need to talk about how do you find the problem, and it's an important concept. I'll give an example. I'll give, for instance, Facebook, for instance. You all know Facebook. I think this story has been told a lot of times. The guy who started Facebook started it as a face match application somewhere in his dormitory. Um, he wasn't he wasn't trying to, well, perhaps he had the idea of building something that would go across the world, but it wasn't like that. At the beginning, it was something that was an advert. In fact, it was restricted to people in advert. It was you had to have .harvard.edu email for you to sign up on Facebook. I think it was called the Facebook then, and the idea was validated that it worked. That a lot of people signed up, a lot of people started using it. And then he extended it into a lot of the campuses in US, Cambridge, and all that before it opened up to just about anybody. So if when we talk about problems, remember the problem, what I said at the beginning about my the first guy who came to me and he jumped at it. I think that there are different types of problems. And this is my classification from the experiences that I've had. There is what we call painkillers, there's vitamins, and there's candy. And so essentially, it's not everything that you have that requires an MVP. Um, if you look at it, a painkiller is like headache. Painkillers, ibuprofen, paracetamol. All of these are things that are sticky. essentially there are things that everybody, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Everyone needs it. So there are things that can you say that this problem is something that is frequently and tied to something that people will do, and it also has an effect on time, money, the frustration that people will have, and that's something that you can build around. So, for instance, I talked about headache. Painkiller, I mean, you use painkiller, it's the literal terms. You use painkillers, you kill headache. Um, Painkillers, I talked about ShopRite, for instance. People are, I mean, somebody, they're trying to, in the night, they're trying to reconcile all the inventory that you have bought and sold in the morning and throughout the day. I mean, it has to be very, very cumbersome for them if they don't have anything, um, anything that they need to do it. But if you sit down somewhere and think, oh, this is a problem, and you don't exactly iterate over it, you don't show somebody, you don't do it, you just sit down in your room and you're writing an application and you're doing something, you really might not know exactly um, what kind of solution will work. Yes, you might think you're solving the problem, but you're not solving it in a way that they want. So painkiller is the first one. Then I talked about the next one is vitamins. Vitamins are things that are nice to have. Basically, I know you and I, everyone, will got vitamins somewhere in our shelf, in our first aid box. They're nice to have. People will say that they like them, but they will not use it. They will probably, I mean, once in a while they'll use it, but it's not something that's embedded within the natural scope of people. So that's the next one. The other one on the first slide you can see there is the candy. Obviously, candy is no real demand. Everybody just, I mean, it's a fun thing, like, oh, candy stuff, but there isn't really new demand. So um the very first thing you need to worry about in terms of what you need to convert from zero to MVP is to be told that this is a painkiller. I mean, it has to be something that a problem that people desperately want to be solved, and you need to identify it very, very well. And for you to identify that, I think one of the steps that I'd like a lot of people to follow, like you can see, you need to first of all look for answer these 6 questions. The first question is, does it solve a problem? Does this problem, sorry, excuse me, does this problem happen often? Does it cost time and money? Sometimes don't cost money, but they cost time, and time is an important concept. I mean, for instance, the simple thing like the headache that I talked about. There's a simple solution to headache sometimes: sleep. Some people it might not cost anything to sleep, but it costs time to sleep. So some people don't want to sleep; they just want to use paracetamol and then go back to work. So do people currently have workaround? That's another workaround. Like I said, people go to sleep. Um, are people really hodging and trying to solve this solution and solve this problem? Do they have a solution that is manual that they can solve? Um, and do you find people are who will be disappointed or will not be happy if that solution was to be removed from the market, like if that solution didn't exist anymore? And those are some of the steps that you really find if you want to know if your idea is a painkiller or not. Um, One of the other things that you also need to be sure of, I think, that need to validate your ideas. Um, you need to validate your ideas. So we've not gotten to where you are building the MVP yet. So, but after you pick the idea, you iterate it, then you need to validate that this idea really works. So to validate your idea, there's a concept that is very important that a lot of people need to really, really get. That I say often or not, if you ask people things, they will tell you whether what they believe innocently or what they think. But if you watch people do what they do normally without asking them, you will find the truth. So conducting interview is really good. Like I said, understanding the real workflow of people, talking to people generally, validation. You hear what they say, but then validating your idea is an important concept from showing people, from getting it from the actual behavior that people work. So that's why you need to do things very quickly. So for instance, you can build a landing page with a call to action, and you can send it to people and see what they're actually doing. One of the examples that I like the most is Zapios, the guys that built Zapios. They didn't care about building a whole bunch of extreme big application. What did they do? Zapier was an application that you allow you could buy shoes and all that. They found out what he did was he just went around stores and then he was taking pictures of shoes. He was taking pictures of shoes. Then he built a landing page, puts those shoes there, and then anytime anybody orders for it, he himself goes to those shops, buys those shoes and ships it to the person. He was doing it himself. It was validated, and then he saw that people liked it. Another concept was Dropbox, for instance. When Dropbox wanted to launch, they had no product, nothing. What they did was they launched a video, a promotion video, and put the idea that people, I mean, everybody was worried. I mean, oh, how am I going to organize my file from my laptop to my phone to my second device and all that? And then they did a promo video, and then they got people to sign up. Over 70,000 people signed up, and then they knew that, oh, wow, we're the product. We're the product. So when you want to validate your idea, which an MVP is an extremely important concept, in you are better served in terms of showing people something they can hold on to and watching their behavior. So if I show you a video of how my idea works, and then I put sign up, how many people will click on that sign up? As against if I tell you what I want, and then would you sign up? Yeah, you could say yes, but would you actually convert to signing up? So it's an important concept that you need to understand, whether you are building an early stage or you're trying to advance a new product. One of the ways, again, there are several ways to do this. In the examples that I've given, you could use this a landing page. Just build a simple landing page, and there are lots of tools that you could use to do that. Now we're in the AI age. You could use Notion, you could use Google Sites, you could use, in fact, you could use Lovable, which one the AI tools that exist today, and just build a simple application and send it to people and watch what they do, not what they say. Another one, you could use like I said, the manual backend yourself, like what the guys with Zapier did. They didn't bother trying to build something that would link users to a store, or waiting for how to go getting all the stores that sell shoes to come on their platform and then open a store there. No, they just, I mean, you request for shoe, they look at that shoe, they go to the store, buy it, and then um and then tip it down to you. Then you validate the ideas um, that you have. Now we go into the section where you have to define your product. Basically, how you define what exactly formulates what your MVP should look like, and having product clarity. The first thing that you need to get is, who is my user? You need to define a persona. So one of the problems that I have seen with people, and this ties the example of the first guy I described, is you have a problem, but you can't really define in very simple sentence, who is my user? I give an example. You talk to somebody and he says, my target user is SMEs. That's very broad. That's an extremely broad aspect, and it begins to give you a challenge in terms of how to drive in. What should I choose as an MVP? Who should I target? Who am I looking for? Well, how do I find the product market fit if my user base is just too broad? Facebook, for instance, it started one people on Harvard, people who wanted to do face match, and then they expanded it. They expanded it. A typical example that everybody would probably be familiar with in one way is Instagram. Instagram started as I think the name was Bubble or something. Bubble. I think there's a different name, and the application was there was a whole lot of stuff in it. It was like he had massive number of features. He had ability to reshape videos and reassess some graphics things. They had so many features, but when the users of the application, when they were looking at it, when they were looking at what people were actually using, people were not using more than just sharing videos, sharing pictures. In fact, they had a whole extensive number of people writing code that the vast majority of those places were not touched. So what did they do? They just cut off all that noise and rebuilt a new application, launched it as Facebook and launched it as Instagram. And all they did was a photo sharing application that had the ability for you to upload a picture, share with somebody else, like, post, and all that. And it resonated more with people who the lifestyle of what they wanted was they were away from their normal work. They wanted to catch up with people who are in different regions, and you could define it in one person. So you need to define exactly who your user is. For instance, fintech that I work with, when we wanted to do something about POS settlements for merchants, the example I was giving about ShopRite and all that, it, it was just easy to define like what I'm looking for. I want to target Lagos-based POS merchants who have issues reconciling end-to-end daily transactions manually. And the definition is so easy for you to see, okay, I am targeting this particular set of people and this particular set of pain points, and it's easy for me to narrow down my expectation. And then when I want to be by MVP, I'll have something that I can get very fast. The next one is you also need to get the persona of what your typical user is all about. So if I define my user, I'll say, okay, what is the goal? What's the frustration that this user is having? What's the environment? And maybe you could even go into things like the literacy skill and digital skill of the customer. Another thing is JTBD, which is job to be done. So it's typical in product management where you could do something like, when I close that shop at night, I want to reconcile the transaction quickly so I can settle sales and avoid errors. And that's like a user story. If you, I'm sure a lot of you will understand what user stories are. Another point is you need to also clearly map out the user journey. When did this start? Oh, somebody is going to key in a card. There's a POS. There's something that goes into it. A transaction happens. Somebody will be debited. You need to clearly map out what the user story is. You need to define all the different parts that product is going to flow. Then finally, for you to now do that, you need to list them out in a way that it is very easy for you to say, these are all the things that my product is going to do. These are the user persona that my product is going to tackle. This is what they're supposed to do. And these are the only things that I'm going to target at the very initial stage. Once you do that, I think the next thing is now for you to define the MVP. So we're now getting to the nitty-gritty of where we actually want to go from zeros to what we've talked about so far is in terms of identifying the product and building out all the different, understanding the product, validating the product if it exists and all that. Now, for you to define and build an MVP and say, oh, look, this what will be my MVP. After you've written down all those things, you need to make sure that your MVP is targeting a single problem, a single user, single problem, or a single workflow. Now, single user doesn't mean that one person. Single user typically means one user group, like one user group, like I said, one section of people. So I think most people, they fail at this stage because they're trying to do a lot of things. Like the first person I talk about, you trying to cramp up so many things to do at the beginning. And that presents an immutable challenge. Like you just need to look at, okay, one user group, then you say one problem, one workflow. And remember, that problem needs to have something that is tied to the core function of what the application or what the product is supposed to do. One of the ways you could do it is to use the Moscow framework, which I think a lot of people might be familiar with. The Moscow framework is must, should, could, and would. So, for instance, I'll use an example of the financial reconciliation app that I have been talking about. I say, look, if I say, what is that thing that this team must have? Well, it must have an ability to take in transactions. Maybe whether you want to upload it or you want to read from a source. You must also have the ability to highlight things that are not matching. So you know, oh, there is a mismatch of Coca-Cola that was sold. Maybe the price that it was sold wasn't correct with the price that the laundry is. You need to be able to identify all that. Things that it should have. Remember, we've gone from must have, which is Moscow, MO, should have. You should have the ability to export results. You should have the ability to search for transactions or search for results. Could have, which is nice to have. You can have something like automated emails and daily reminders and things like that, like send to management, you could send to people. Now, the reason is we could have it is because you could export it and then do it yourself, or you could automate it. Then the last thing is things that it won't have, which is things that you won't have in your MVP. Things like maybe, for instance, you could say, okay, I need a mobile app, I need an Android app, I need iOS app, I need AI features inside it, and all of that. Those are things that you don't necessarily need to have in an MVP. So I think the assessment of the point is to say that an MVP is essentially the test of your risk case assumption. What is the most important thing that you think you want to validate in this your product idea, and then build that minimum viable products around that, and then iterate over it. The next point is, now when I talked about build, I think next point is how do you build? How do you go about building your MVP? There are different ways, but the best way is to choose the fastest way. Remember, you could spend 6 months building an MVP, and then you could find out that there's no product, there's no problem that is being solved, and then you're back to square one. You could spend 10 days in building it, and then you're back to square one. But with 10 days, it means that you're going to have a lot more cycles to get to the right point than if you spend so long in building it. So I've spoken about some of the approaches, but I'll just try to itemize them here. First one is no code MVP. You could use things like Bubble, things like Glide, Retool, Zapier, Notion, Lovable. You could even use ChatGPT and serve up something. Essentially, using no code tools the fastest. The fastest. You don't need to. So make sure that your MVP is focused on the core value that you are bringing, and abstract out the noise. You don't necessarily have to hire all the sets of people going around things that you can't control. Focus as much as possible. Try and make sure that the MVP is focused on achieving the main goal. If you're building a logistics application, you don't need to have to talk to logistics providers. You don't need to have to talk to companies. You don't need at that point. What you need to validate is would users use this application if you have. So I just build a login page, or I build a dashboard where they can sign in, and you could do that with a lot of all these tools that I talked about. Bubble, Glide, Sophia, you could do that. And once you do that, you could make the user experience at the back end. That's the last one where you said you could put yourself at the back end if you think you need it. Just get it into an Excel sheet or something, and then go and do the work that actually needs to be done manually. Or you could automate it in the best way that you can if you have ability to do code. If you're engineering inclined, things like low code tools like AppSmith, like what they call it, Upright and Firebase and Superbase. You could use all of those tools for low code. If you're building an infrastructure product that's something that is infrastructure ready, you could use things like backend first tools like React and Python, which are those tools have a lot of frameworks that allow you to build things very fast to all Square-based. And the last one is the manual MVP that I talked about. I think there are times where you don't even need anything. You don't need anything. You could just put a phone number on the link. Put a phone number and have people call. People call you. Oh, you deliver food stuff at the fastest place. Look at child deck, for instance. If you wanted to do child deck a long time ago, you could have people call or people using WhatsApp. A lot of people do that. A lot of marketers on the island, they do that. They don't. You don't really need to. Um, their venue is not the problem. So if you wanted to build something that you could guarantee people delivering food to somebody within 5 minutes, um, you don't necessarily need an application all well built for you to test the ability that you can deliver that within 5 minutes. You can move as fast as possible, abstracting out the things that are not in your control, and validating the idea over it. If you know what I mean. So the next point that you need to know after you've built the application, first of all, you've tested it, you've ideated, you've now used any of these parts to build the application, is for you to now, okay, how do I know that this thing that I've built is correct? Um, if you have an MVP, how do I know? You need to be able to set that at the beginning, and it comes down to um, two main things, and then two other. So two main things is activation and intention. Um, Activation and intention are really what will determine if you're going to reach a product market fit at the end of the day. So activation is, oh, you give people something to use. How how many of them maybe when you had a video or a landing page, how many of them actually clicked on your sign up? How many of them completed the action that you said? Now, if they completed it, how many of them came back again? Or they just used it at first because they saw the link, or they just remember it's supposed to be a painkiller and not a vitamin. If it's a vitamin, then they'll probably not come back again. So if you're going to assess what your product viability is, you can use your MVP essentially to move yourself from zero to the point where you can actually say people are actually using the product or they're actually calling up, but you don't have all your features. But that single thing that you have, um, are they actually coming back for it or they're not? And then you can actually see exactly where people are dropping off, what they're choosing more, and validate the ideas that you think you are. Um, that's the feedback. And remember, feedback is an extremely important thing, and the way you get feedback um, is even more important than the feedback itself. You could get the feedback from just having a survey in the app and tell people, "Oh, how did you enjoy this our service? How did you like this our service?" Or you could have feedback from the perspective of having things like mixed panel and insights that could track people users behavior inside your app and see how long they spend at each stage um, your products, and you convert that into real insights. And that part is the most important one, because if you and many a times, if you ask users to fill a survey and you ask them, how did you feel about web application? Sometimes users don't exactly have the attention span to make detailed um, description of how they actually feel about the application. People only, customers only, when they feel very, very bad about your application, then they would easily say, oh, I don't like your application. But if they are neutral about your application, then you have more of false positives, because what you will end up getting is you never know if that person will come back or not. So you won't give you the right feedback. You just tell you, oh, everything is fine, or I was good. And then you really will struggle to know why they're not coming back. But if you use how the user transitioned from each place, maybe it was confused at some point, he clicked the button, then he was confused, and he stayed longer on that button, then you can get a sense of how the MVP is going um, in that direction. Um, Another point that you need to get now is the iteration loop. Now, iteration loop is a very important part of your MVP, because it is the once you are able to build the MVP and you started testing it, the phase between MVP and full product, which it never ends, is is you learning the outcome that is coming from what people are doing in your MVP, and then prioritizing what exactly needs to be built and measuring it, learning from it, improving and expanding your MVP. So essentially, your product is expanding and it's built your value that you're offering I remember when you started the MVP, what you started with just one user and one workflow and one problem. But then you begin to expand it into more user scopes and you test those ideas and you move, and it gradually leaves the realm of MVP into a full scale product. An example I'd give is Airbnb, for instance. When Airbnb was to start, the guy Brian Chesky, um, he it was something like they had, I think they had a conference somewhere in San Francisco, and a lot of people there, a lot of the people there didn't have a place to stay because the conference was overbooked. And then Brian and his colleague just felt, oh, this is a good place to start. And all they did was just, they had hair beds in their own room and they put those hair beds down and they'd have people come and book in and then use it. And then a lot of people um, felt very receptive to that. And it was easy for them to quickly see that, look, this was something that people were open to take to use, and people were open to sharing homes with people. On either two, it was like people had to go to hotels and they were comfortable with hotels. But I mean, so people are actually open to coming to other people's houses and using it. For many part of the beginning of it wasn't like a full application where all the houses were there. But the founders were literally looking for houses themselves, looking for um, um, linking up people's requests with where they can stay themselves, and figuring out what needs to be done to keep the application moving. And over time, they built more features and built more features, and it has become what it is today. But the important thing there is that the application itself was a painkiller, because people, when you go to a place and you're looking for um, housing and you don't have it, you are definitely going to patronize anybody who's providing solution for you. Um, One of the other important things that you need to, as part of the iteration loop, you need to improve very fast. And because customer attention span can be very, very limited. So the time between when you converted your MVP and you have learned, and your iteration into the updated product, you need to ensure that this is extremely fast and it's timely enough um, in that sense. Um, the final takeaway, um, I think that I'd really like to say is here, is that you need to first of all ensure that um, the product that you're trying to start with, when you start with anything, you make sure that it's a painkiller. Like, just think about it from that dimension. Don't just go blowing things in the head. First of all, I'm looking at this problem. Who would die to have this problem? It might be a little set, it might be school children, it might be underage, it might be overage, it might be old people, but you need to exactly look at who exactly is going to be worried about this. And then it's also fine if it's a vitamin, but you just need to be sure that this is what it is, and then it will allow you to understand how you track retention. The next thing is you also need to validate with behavior, which one of the things I've said, not vibes. And vibes are usually ideas. People just think, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do that. Next thing, you need to build the fastest thing that is possible, and that will teach you the most about your ideas. You can't spend 6 months in building an MVP product that is essentially the entire product. um, so another point is you need to be flexible and amenable to it. Like I talked about the Instagram problem. If users don't care, if you finish what you have done and users don't care about it, you need to iterate fast and figure out what people want, and then realign your product into um, that line. The next thing and last thing is you need to be fast in terms of the speed um, that you use to execute the MVP and the time that you learn and move on. So if you keep learning and you have faster turnaround time in your execution, you invariably you're going to have an unstoppable execution, because what is going to happen is that every time market dynamics changes, you are very fast in learning and very fast in reacting to it. Thank you very much.